Alors, bonjour et bienvenue à Imagination. Aujourd'hui, on a un grand plaisir d'accueillir deux de nos cinéastes en conversation sur leurs films qui ont... OK, start that again. Yum, yum, yum.
A little.
Alors, bonjour, bienvenue à Imagination. Aujourd'hui, on a le plaisir d'accueillir Kelly Walker avec le film My FIONA et Marion Hill avec son film Ma Belle, Ma Beauty. Kat Setzer et moi-même, Charlie Boudreau, du festival, on va avoir une conversation avec ces cinéastes qui ont fait un film novateur, des films qu'on ne voit pas souvent au festival, et vont nous apporter une perspective tout nouvelle de ce que c'est de créer des films queer. Alors, je cède la parole à Kat Setzer, qui va nous présenter plus davantage les cinéastes, et on va faire une session un peu bilingue aujourd'hui pour avoir Marion, elle vient de Louisiane, donc on va faire un peu de français, mais on va garder le ton plutôt anglophone pour faciliter la conversation avec Kelly, parce que ce qu'on veut au fond, c'est que les gens discutent, que ces deux cinéastes discutent entre elles de leur film. Alors Kat, take it.
Thanks, Charlie. We're trying something new and we're pretty excited about it. It is a conversation with four people, which is wonderful. Just a little tiny recap. We're going to do the conversation between the two of you. We might have some sort of little questions to kind of guide you, but the real wonderful goal is to have you two kind of speak to each other about some of the issues, because I really do see some really interesting overlaps between what you two have produced. So let's get going.
So, first question, and we're going with a little bilingual here. I'm going to ask both of you tell us about yourselves. We'll start with Marion, if that's okay. And so basically the question, Kelly, so you can think about it for the next few minutes. Like, tell us about your work. Tell us about how you got to this film, what your background is, what your history in creation. It's your few minutes of mini masterclass about yourself, to give folks who are watching an insight into how this film was made. So, Marion Hill, est-ce que tu peux nous parler un peu de toi, un peu de comment tu es arrivé à ce magnifique film original? D'ailleurs, ton nom, le nom de ton film n'est pas avec ton nom, mais c'est Ma Belle, Ma Beauty, qui est ton film. Donc, 2 minutes. Si tu pouvais nous parler, surtout en français, mais là, on va faire un petit recap en anglais pour faciliter la conversation.
Avec plaisir. Je suis... Alors, waouh, je suis une artiste depuis très jeune. Je pense que j'ai commencé comme musicienne à l'âge de 4 ans. J'ai commencé le piano. Et du coup, j'ai toujours été attirée par le monde créatif. J'ai découvert le cinéma, je pense, surtout je cherchais les histoires queer pour moi quand j'étais jeune, quand j'étais teenager. Et c'est comme ça, parmi le vouloir de voir des histoires d'amour qui parlaient à moi et ce que je cherchais, mais aussi cette fascination avec la musique du film. J'ai commencé à écrire des film scores très jeune, enfin pour les courts-métrages de mes amis, et c'est comme ça qu'en fait j'ai découvert le monde du cinéma. Je suis en fait francophone, pas à cause de la Louisiane, mais en fait à cause du Vietnam. Ma mère qui est née à Saigon et qui a grandi, depuis l'âge de 15 ans, elle était en France. Et mon père qui est anglais. Et du coup, nous, on se retrouve aux États-Unis. Et moi, j'ai voulu retourner en France pour faire une histoire qui ressemblait à moi, qui pour moi, c'était j'ai commencé avec une idée très sensory en anglais, sensorielle. Je savais exactement comment je voulais que mes créations se sentent, comment je voulais. I knew how I wanted people to feel. I had ambiance that I wanted to recreate. Et voilà, et je suis à la Nouvelle-Orléans depuis 2017 et c'est là où j'ai trouvé mon équipe et où j'ai trouvé mes deux co-stars, Hannah Pepper and Idella Johnson. Et voilà, je vous ai fait un petit peu un tour de partout, mais voilà.
Wow, that's very that's very interesting. A quick, I guess, a quick summary is that the importance of music in your films, which I think we will come back to a little later. But did you want to, like, in a couple of lines, give us that in English?
Yeah, I mean, I discovered film through music, through my love for, well, I was a pianist when I was 4 and just did it very seriously. I also played the oboe.
Nice.
I played oboe all through college. And it was through a love for film scores that I really was drawn into filmmaking, and I started composing. That was the first thing I did in college, and then realized that actually it was the entire process of filmmaking that I was in love with. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Lots more questions on that for you, but for now, Kelly.
Yeah.
Yourself.
Yeah. So I am from Australia, from Brisbane, Australia. And I think around 11, 12 years old, I started making films. But I was making like feature films. Like I thought I was like a little Spielberg in Australia. I had no like difference of what they were doing in Hollywood and what we were doing there. And when I turned 12, I got screenwriting program. And then when I turned 13, I got editing software. So we did, my best friend and I, we did about 4 films by the time I was 15. And they were terrible, but it was kind of our film school. And then I moved to LA and kind of my day job was video editor. So I kind of did that for a while. And I would sit in the editing bay with some directors and be like, if I had just done this, or why didn't they try this here? And I kind of realized I needed to put my money where my mouth was. So I was like, all right, I'm going to start making shorts. And My Fiona is my first feature. And it's kind of, it's inspired by when I was about 11, 12 years old, my babysitter passed away from suicide. And it was out of the blue. No one could see it coming. And the effect it had on me for the rest of my life was just like, whoever I was the day before I got that news was not, I feel like almost like the child was taken from me. So I kind of wanted to make write a story about just how it affects everyone so differently and how grief is such a personal experience and there's no right or wrong way to grieve, and then kind of take those elements of the gray shades of grief and then also exploring my own bisexuality and looking at the gray shades of bisexuality. Because I felt that growing up, I didn't have a representation that mirrored what I felt. So I didn't identify for so long. And then by the time I kind of was like, oh, this makes sense. I was happily married to a man. I'm like, well, do I even get to own this part of myself? And it was through writing the character Jane, where I kind of almost put her out in front. And I was like, you explore all this stuff and then I'll step into my own. And so kind of all that intersection. I hope people understood it. I tried to talk slowly, which I have a habit of talking fast.
Did you edit your film, Kelly?
No, that was the first thing I ever shot that I didn't edit. But I felt that because I wrote it and directed it, and it was my first time doing a feature, I was like, I don't know if I'm the right person to see this through. So we brought in an editor very, very early on. He was cutting daily, actually. So at night, I'd see yesterday's, like a string out of yesterday's cut.
Wow.
And he and I worked wonderfully together. But you edited your film.
I did.
How is that?
Pretty great. I mean, yeah, I've always edited my stuff. I think, you know, we were so much not having cash that, you know, it was the only way to make the film, first of all, but second of all, it allowed me, we shot in 14 days. So it allowed me to like edit, you know, only shoot what I knew we were going to use. And it really works for me. Like, I understand the benefits of having new eyes come in as the editor, but as far as like our resources were concerned and my wanting to really be in control of, like, not control, but really experiment in a hands-on way with what I was doing for my first feature and really, you know, be the one watching all the takes, yeah, I think I might keep doing it, but
I definitely want to try it. It was hard having someone else. Like the first day I had to sit on my hands in editing because it was like, it took everything to not go touch that computer. Like,
right. Or like, get out of the way, yeah.
Just move. And I'm a really fast editor, and he was just probably normal pace. It was like this like painful thing. I'm like, breathe, Walker, just breathe. Like, he was great though. He let me cut the sex scene, which I thought was really respectful. That he's like, you know what? I don't know anything about this. I'm gonna hand this off. And the assistant editor and I did that together.
Nice.
So I thought it was definitely a collaboration. I don't know if we have to if I can actually ask a question or because I
completely ask a question, please.
Because Marion, you used to DP, right? Or you're also a DP, right? Don't you do camera?
I'm not a DP. I mean, I can shoot, but I'm not a DP. Yeah.
I'm so curious what that relationship was like with your DP, because she was a first-time filmmaker. I mean, first-time feature DP.
Yeah.
And knowing the technical aspects behind it, like what was that relationship?
Amazing. I mean, she is like a bajillion times more. Just like, she's a true DP and I very much am not. So it never really felt, you know, like she was doing something I could do, like zero. It was, Lauren Gutierrez is, yeah, she's based in LA if you want to meet her. She did AFI.
Oh, amazing.
Cinematography. And it's just the most disciplined, hardworking, but also like extremely creative and extremely intuitive DP cinematographer. And yeah, working with her was really amazing, and I can't wait to do it again.
When you find your people, you find your people.
Yeah. And we had to, you know, we were so low budget also that like the lighting that we had was, I mean, we had minimal stuff, and so she was like literally using the sun for the film, and the way, and like prepped so much around the house in terms of like what time of day we should be shooting what scene and like where the sun was going to be. And yeah, that felt very like earthy to do that. Yeah, it's kind of beautiful to be so reliant on the sun to tell your story. Yeah.
I really, actually, it's wonderful how you describe it that way, because that's really very much like so apparent with your film. First of all, before I get and ask a smart question, is that it really did feel like we got to have a nice vacation to the south of France, which was very welcome for me. I just rewatched it last night and I was like, oh, so beautiful. And there is such a reliance and really like a respect for what you were saying about the light through windows, but also, you know, all of those various kind of whatever dinner or party kind of scenes, you know, the way that the sun is setting and so forth, to sort of set a mood, how the story is going to continue. And really those windows for me about the end of day, beginning of day, but also the changing of like, how do I describe this? Like somebody's sort of statement of their perspective is, you know, shutters open or shutters closed, that kind of a thing. And I really found that to be really profound. And that's all really very much about the light.
Totally. Yeah. Thanks for saying that. No one said that about the shutters before. I like that.
Good eye. Good eye. I have a question about the pool, the sinking pool.
Yeah.
The metaphor behind it. And was that something you always knew you were going to bring into it? Or was the pool sinking? And you're like, well, we have to make sense of this. Like,
right. Yeah. It was for sure a combo of both. It is a pool that leaks. And yeah, I had been told that, you know, we weren't going to be able to fill it for the shoot. So early on was working that into the story, but then of course it makes a lot of sense, you know.
It's a happy accident.
Yeah, totally. There's a lot of things you can put, like whether it's about water or whether it's, you know, for me, it's kind of like a pool is like a symbol of like paradise, right? It's like luxury and you know, her being in the south of France, you know, is supposed to be paradise and supposed to be luxury, but it's not. Like it doesn't feel like it's supposed to. So the pool is not, you know, functioning the way it's supposed to, and there's holes in her paradise.
I loved that. I was like,
excellent.
Just a brilliant way to like show what's happening inside. I've had a pool that was leaking before, and there was something so sad about it.
Yeah,
the visual of it, you know, and it does feel like there's something emptying out of you.
Yeah, and pools are so like there's so much work, and they're so expensive, and they're so hard to maintain. But the whole concept of it is that it's like this pure, you have to put in so much work for it to be pure, for it to be clean.
And you don't even use it very often. So it's this other element of it's just thing that looks nice, but is barely used.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that as an excellent metaphor. Fantastic.
Thank you.
I have a question.
I'm curious. Oh yeah, go ahead, Kat.
Oh, no. It's about you guys. You ask away.
Well, I was just gonna throw back the in terms of like symbols and metaphors, the opening scene, Kelly, where they're releasing the lanterns. First of all, what was it like to shoot that, and also like what were you thinking about in terms of what that visually, metaphorically?
Yeah. Well, I wanted to shoot at a real lantern festival. My producer laughed at me and was like, that's never going to happen. And legally, you cannot light lanterns in California. So we couldn't do it. We couldn't even fake it. So that was actually on a green screen. And our gaffer and our producer and Art, they kind of rigged these floating sticks. It was all very last minute. I was pretty sure it wasn't going to happen. And it was on Jeanette's birthday. And we didn't get to shoot. We had 2 green screens that we were shooting on. One we never even got to move over to. So we lost a lot of it. And then we had to add some CGI in post. But to me, I don't know if anyone's been to a lantern festival, but there's something so, you've never felt closer to your wishes and your dreams than when you write them on this, you know, this thin piece of paper. And when you watch it lift up and it meets everyone else's wishes and dreams and love letters, it is such a collective experience. So for me, the whole idea of the lanterns, it's just like when we're living in that fantasy of your hopes and your wishes, and you're not thinking about the parts of life that are going to be hard or devastating or grief-stricken. So it's almost like there's a dreamy quality to that memory. At the same time, the experience is dreamy and And bringing it back at the end, I'm assuming people have probably seen it by this point in watching the conversation. Yeah, so bringing it back at the end was just the kind of the symbol of lighting the lantern privately, being a personal experience, without that idea of the collective, you know. And I've been to the Lantern Festival now twice. I just went last month.
Where?
It's in Nevada.
Okay, cool.
Absolutely. I don't know if you know this, Marion. Jeanette, who plays Jane, she was one of my best friends. She passed away in January.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
So yeah. So this film is her last film. So this last Lantern Festival, I went and I wrote a letter to Jeanette and raised that. The strangeness of its symbolism to the film that, you know, you just don't even, and even stuff I was writing, there wasn't, I never wrote the same dialogue, obviously, but like there were moments that I was like feeling probably whatever Jane was feeling at the end of that story. And yeah, it was pretty profound to be sending Jeanette a lantern. But
that's amazing. Actually, that's a really interesting kind of segue to some other things we want to talk about, but most importantly, really giving some respect to Jane. When I did hear that news, and it, you know, I got the big feels, but you were talking about the Lantern Festival and the power of sending this message up into the heavens and the collectivity of all of that. And the dialogue in your film when Jane is releasing the lantern is like, and the very, very end of the film is so extremely powerful. She says, I loved you with everything I had to love. I loved you the way that way because you loved me with everything you had too. Thank you for choosing me to share your life. And that is said by Jane towards Fiona. And that is really, so it was so moving to me because it really was an expression of like this power of this relationship that was like sometimes, you know, best friends, but putting that on an equal and exalted position in terms of like the important relationships that we have in our lives, and also that women have with one another, and that it isn't sort of relegated to this is my best friend hanging out, we hang out, but is really a crucial and really, really important foundational relationship in one's life, and I think in all of our lives. And that's one of the connections that I found so wonderful between your two films, is the sort of explorations of female intimacy and relationships and so forth on so many different planes. So maybe we can kind of segue over to thinking about that, you two.
I would love to ask Marion, I love how Birdie gave different parts of herself to both her relationships, and like, and it was shown in such simple ways. And sometimes it was shown through the way that Lane was watching them, how he was watching. The husband's name is
Fred.
Yeah, or how Fred was watching their experience. I'd love to hear more about like how you kind of decided who they were within that world.
Great question. Well, yeah, I mean, I think like a tale, first of all, Kat, to what you were speaking to, I mean, I think exploring the different kinds of relationships that women share is what drives me as an artist. Like, I think whether it's mother-daughter, whether it's sisterhood, whether it's lovers, ex-lovers, platonic lovers, whatever, it's just this sense of like abundance, and that there are all, and this is where, you know, we become hand in hand with polyamory. It's kind of like relationships are yours to define, and with communication and consent and like self-awareness, you can actually achieve the abundance of the relationships that you want in life, want and need. And I think that was something that, yeah, I talked about a lot with the two lead actors, was, you know, what exactly what does each person in this triad like give you that you need, and what do they not give you that you need, and you know, not necessarily comparing one with the other, and not seeing it as, I mean, I think a huge the toxic thing about monogamy is that, you know, if you feel something for one person and then you feel something for another person, you're made to feel like it's betrayal, right? Like it's like you are wronging your partner by feeling something for someone else. But what if it were a world where we could actually honor like that we feel different things for different people, and that's actually the key for like fruitful life and happiness and joy and success, whatever success is. And yeah, and I think what was cool was watching how it was the three of them, like each of their relationships with each other were actually very organic. There wasn't, I mean, we definitely did talk a lot. We used backstory to talk about you know, what they shared, but as far as like what their dynamic is in the present, it was kind of as it was.
You could feel that their history, like we didn't need to be filled in on who they were when they were in their relationship, because it was all present underneath, which was so brilliant.
No, I appreciated the lack of expository dialogue. It just sort of evolved, and then it was like 30 minutes in where we kind of have a sense of Bertie and Lane's relationship. And I love that you just allowed an audience to be intelligent and to have to do some work and make and be present, and not just sort of passively be, you know, just absorbing the information. You have to kind of work and wonder what is going on right here. And that's kind of what I so loved about your film.
It wasn't until I think if Fred says to someone like, our ex is here, and then it was like, oh. And it's just one line. And I think filmmakers, we have the hardest time like trusting our audience to figure it out. We almost want to spoon feed them at times. So I thought you did such a great job with that.
Thank you. And I think we also like, it's okay if someone does, it's so interesting, you know, what some audience members actually don't pick up, and being okay with that not everyone is going to understand everything, you know? And I think because that's kind of how life is and relationships are, especially, is that it's you know, we're constantly observing each other and trying to figure each other out, and it all feels different to everyone.
Yeah, and we don't get all the information at the exact same time in any relationship. We're learning as we go, and so it's like that was such a great representation of that.
Thank you. Yeah. How did you, Kelly, like work on your actor chemistry or backstory? Because they also, you know, there's this whole marriage that has clearly a very complicated past.
Yeah.
Like that you have a marriage as a rooting within the polyamory. You know, there are three people, and then, you know, in My Belle, My Beauty, it is Fred. And so she's sort of navigating all of that kind of stuff. But in My Fiona, the third person obviously is the person that is no longer alive, but is ever present in everybody's thoughts and in every single scene. But it's interesting that there is the choice of kind of that representing that kind of commitment of like, this relationship is a marriage relationship, and the other ones are sort of different ones.
Yeah. And how society deems the marriage as the most important.
Exactly.
Why? Look, as a married person, I love my husband, but my best friends, they hold my souls. My soul is like, they have all pieces of them. And of course, my husband has a piece too, but I can't survive without my friends. They're the people that pick me up, and those female relationships, like, I don't know. I think there's a vulnerability with another woman, at least in my experience, that I can't have in my male. I don't know. which I think is I just think that's interesting. That's probably why I wanted to look at the friendship aspect of losing. And I'm terrified of losing my friends. Like that's the thing that I worry the most about in life, which is the irony of after my Fiona. But back to your question about the relationships and stuff, Jeanette and I have been friends since like 2014, and she'd been at every single table read. So she really knew all the versions of Jane that I kind of played with. And then we talked a lot. And then her and Sarah, who played Fiona, I just had them and said, I said, go get lunch, get drinks, hang out, go on friend dates. And I want you guys to figure out what that backstory is for you. You know, figure out, like, come up with ideas of, what was high school prom like, and what was this? And I don't want to know any of it. I was like, this is yours to have. And then with Corbin, who plays Gemma, we didn't have as much time with her. So we kind of weren't able to facilitate the same sort of conversations. But on set, we were always talking about, what happened in, Fiona and her marriage, and how would a fight go down, and just kind of figuring out. I think if you can kind of have an idea of a what if, then you can fill in the blanks for other stuff.
Totally. That's interesting that you didn't want to know what the backstory was.
No, I didn't. I wanted it to be their thing. And even when Fiona gets that text message in the beginning, I had an idea of what it was, but I've never told anyone. But I told Sarah, who plays Fiona, I said, I want you to come up with it for yourself and don't tell me. And then after filming, I asked her, I was like, what was it? We had the same thing.
Wow. That's
Are
cool.
you going to share that with us, or is that a secret?
I don't share
secret.
It needs to remain a secret, for sure.
Yeah, because it's like, it's the only way to feel a sliver of what people that lose people to suicide feel. Like they're left with this question mark forever, and they have to just work. They just have to move alongside the question mark. So it's like giving the audience the tiniest taste of that.
Absolutely.
Wow.
I'd love to ask about the music in your film, because it was like an extra character. It was so powerful. And I'm just wondering, how much did you know when you were shooting what specifically these sound, like these beats and these scores would feel like while you were on set, or did you kind of play around with it in post?
And as well, let me just do a little piggyback on that. The importance of music, and also for the lead character, for Birdie, that it is like literally her voice. And I think I was stunned by how important the soundtrack and music was. It really is a character, as you said, but it also really is so integral to Birdie's sense of self, and then her sense of, powerfully occupying where she is at that moment with all the changes that are happening.
Yeah. So like I said, everything starts with music for me, visuals, story. I write with a playlist. I actually can't write if I'm not listening to music. There's a lot of, it goes also hand in hand with the fact that I knew exactly how I wanted this film to feel. And by a big part of that is, how does it sound? And how does each moment of it sound? Being in New Orleans, there is music everywhere all the time. I also worked for 2 years at the local radio station. So I was just around a lot of musicians. A lot of my friends were kind of gigging musicians, very much how Birdie and Fred are in the jazz scene. And I did have a friend who very much had this relationship with her singing that was like very tied to depression, and it was so interesting and profound to me. And obviously I don't want to like go into my friend's relationship to her art, but let's see. I did start, so music is very much a character because it was a character before anything else was a character. Me and the composer who is based here in New Orleans also, Mahmoud Chouki, we started writing before, like as I was writing the script. So I had kind of visuals of the place to show him and kind of music styles that I was thinking about, and we kind of for months just did this back and forth. I would go to his house and he would just kind of play around, and we would identify what were the sounds and the moods that were speaking to me, and then I would kind of take those and build scenes around them in the script. We recorded obviously the song that Birdie sings in the film before. We recorded that before we shot, but other than that, it was mainly like we had a lot of scratch ideas. I used music to direct. Actually, I had totally forgotten this, but one of the actors reminded me that before we were shooting one of the sex scenes, the one between Noah and Lane that's more lively and has music to it, I played music for them before shooting that to invite them to know what it would feel like, what it should feel like. What else? I could talk about this for hours. I'm trying to give the cliff notes. But yeah, and once we came back in post and I was going through the film with the composer, and we were like, okay, well, this piece this is going to go here. That it was kind of a situation where we were referring back to ideas and placing them. And then what was most amazing was we recorded here the whole score at the beginning of COVID, so all the musicians were very much available to come and pass through the studio. So we had like 25 people come to the studio, and the way we kind of recorded it in the same way that New Orleans thinks of music, which is people show up and are given a structure, given charts, given a few instructions, but then they just run with it and do their thing. And for me, that's how this whole film felt, was like, here's the general what we're going for. Bring yourself to it and like fill it with everything that feels honest to you. And yeah, honestly, the whole score recording process was like one of my a favorite part of the whole process for me in that way. Like, I didn't think of it as an extension of the creative directing, but it really was.
And you describing it just now, it just came to me that the editing and the pacing of that film is so very much about like the beats. You will have like action, and then the sort of slow, I don't know the music terms, unfortunately, but like the slow, the three of them walking to the party, in slow-mo, that deserted road, or like, there'll just be sort of interesting kind of pacing, which is a lot like how the music unfolds. So I like that intertwining between what you hear and what you see. It's unique.
Totally. Yeah, thanks. I think a lot of us think of scoring and composing as like the afterthought. It's like you put the whole film together and then you bring in a composer to kind of like accentuate everything that you've done. And I don't think that brings out the best of the music's potential in a film at all. Like, I think it's very much a part of the fabric and not an afterthought.
They were extremely integral to one another.
That's one thing I'll do differently is I don't have a musical ear and I don't have the terminology, and I struggled the most with my composer.
It's hard.
Because I didn't know, I didn't know how to speak with him, and I wasn't helping him, and he, you know what I mean? So I think like That's usually my biggest advice to filmmakers. I'm like, know enough about everything. Because like in editing, I was like, you know, but then when I got there, it was just like Googling, like how Jane Googles random stuff. I'm Googling how to talk to a composer. This poor guy. But it does, like, and it all worked out. He was very patient with me, but
Right.
you know, who knows, had I been able to bring more to the table, what that would have looked like.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So,
But
yeah.
you make up for that with your your editing, for example.
Yeah, I mean, we all have our, yeah.
Marion, est-ce que peux-tu nous parler un petit peu de ton choix d'aller en France?
Alors pour moi, cette région en France, c'était la région, en fait, j'ai passé beaucoup de temps quand j'étais jeune, donc je connaissais ce village même très bien. J'ai ma famille autour, j'ai les amis autour, et pour moi, c'était important que j'ai un système de soutien pour ce film et qu'on se sent bien. Parce que j'ai emmené j'ai emmené des crew members qui n'avaient jamais quitté les États-Unis, par exemple. Donc, pour pouvoir aller dans un endroit où on est vraiment isolé, où on peut travailler, où on voyage pas trop, où on a vraiment pu avoir une histoire summer camp tous ensemble. C'était important pour moi qu'on puisse travailler dans cette façon-là. Aussi, ça me motivait de voir le sud de la France et le sud des États-Unis ensemble, parce que moi, j'avais passé du temps dans le sud de la France et aussi dans le sud des États-Unis, et je voyais des parallèles intéressants que je n'avais jamais vu explorer. Et voilà, moi j'ai grandi en parlant français avec ma maman et anglais avec mon papa, et ça m'intéressait aussi de voir un mariage où les deux personnes sont de cultures ou de langues différentes, où voilà, où il y en a une qui est immigrante et l'autre qui est chez soi, et cette dynamique entre deux personnes mariées qui sont amoureux, qui s'aiment beaucoup, mais en fait, il y aura toujours quelque chose qu'ils ne comprennent pas entre eux. Et ouais.
In like, I find that super interesting what you just said. The parallel between you living in the south of the United States right now and choosing to shoot your film in the south of France, for the folks who didn't grasp that perhaps with the language. And also, we were just talking about music. Now, these are all parts that come together. Could you talk a little bit about that? Or expand perhaps, and give us examples on what you said. There were similarities between these two southern regions, very different countries. Like, could you give us a few examples of that, and what that meant to your film, and how you got to that part?
There's something very culturally specific about being Southern, and I think it's like Southern wherever you are, if you're whatever that means for your culture, like to be Southern is a thing. And I think as far as like transatlantic stories where we're seeing Americans in Europe or vice versa, when do we ever get the specificity of folks who are from the South in like meeting each other? And I think there are cultural specificities that are even harder to slide into when you're an immigrant in the South of a place. Because, you know, as you see in the film, like most people don't speak English in the South of France. And, you know, I think for Birdie, who probably has a very American view of what the South of France is, to be plopped into a place where she's like very much exoticized. She's kind of this alien. No one can actually talk to her because she doesn't speak French. I think there's this very unexpected inability to connect, even though she's also from the South. And yeah, for me, I was also just very excited to see, you know, a woman from New Orleans in that position, and to see, and, you know, the reality of her moving through that town and meeting people, and the way they would talk to her and be fascinated by her was very much reflective of what we see in the film. I mean, I think, you know, to be sitting at a table and not understand what anyone is saying, and no one's really making an effort to involve you in the conversation. I mean, that was how I watched my dad go through that for years. Yeah, I think I'm curious what it you know, elicited for viewers, what kinds of connections you saw, but yeah, that's what I got. It's very nuanced, and it's very but it's also kind of just fun also, you know, to like put two cultures together and see what happens. That's something I'm very passionate about as well.
No, I think that Montreal audiences will absolutely appreciate what you just said.
Yeah.
Because like that, the duality, the nuance, the like almost not describable, you know, what they are. They just, the differences are, they just sort of are. Like in Montreal, they call it franglais, where you just, somebody you start in one language, you finish in the other. It's just the way of it. It's not a conscious decision. It's just how it works. So I think all of those things, that kind of identity is really intuitive based on how you grew up. Like if you grew up with two languages spoken in the home, there you have it. Here's our this is the festival, the real festival director. Phoebe the cat. Yeah.
Here for it.
I wouldn't mind it unless you have something to put, Charlie. Sorry, I'm having a paper issue with the cat. I am interested in you two kind of exploring like notions. We've explored notions of polyamory, and I'm curious about polyamory, and also, sorry, that was a cat incident. Polyamory and bisexuality in terms of like what your motivation and also your strategies to describe both of those. Because for me, the polyamory in both of your films is so fascinating. And as well, we have not seen bisexuality, you know, mainstream cinema doesn't really have any real respectful reflections of it, and maybe not queer cinema even. And I find that really refreshing and wonderful about both of your films.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess, I mean, I think, Marion, I think you're similar in the sense, like, we're always writing. It sounds like you write a lot from, like, you write what you know and what you've experienced or what you're seeing around you. And that's the only way I know how to write. If it's something I want to, like, explore, or something I don't understand about myself, or a viewpoint on the world that I'm getting confused by, I guess. I think, you know, I think with, at least for bisexuality, I feel like a lot of the films I've seen, it's like, it's this big thing to figure it out, and then usually they go back to the man, you know, and it's almost like the bisexuality was just like pop out and then pop back in, and I was frustrated that it had to have an end, you know, it has to be or that, or this, you know, this discovery then defines who they are, and it's like, what if it's just integrated inside that life? What if it's just a part of it? And what if it there's not a resolution because your sexuality does not get resolved? You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I could see myself completely being in a polyamorous relationship. Like that's something that if that happens in my future, I would not be like, didn't see that one coming. But again, but that's, if I'm married right now, then what's my resolve? It's like, does that mean I'm resolved to being a married woman to a man for the rest of my life? Like, no. So
yeah,
I think I'm making sense. Just that, yeah, it's just like keeping it open, exploring it. And then the idea that Jane wants labels, wants something that's black and white, and just that I just removing the concept that right, wrong, yes, no, is or isn't. And my hope for audiences is that just like lets them reflect on their own experience and maybe take some of that pressure off. Having to know, you know, who you are today, and make a new choice tomorrow.
No, I find that so refreshing, both of your films, like that it's, that there are no, the boxes are opened up, you know, and that's really, that is what it is to be a human. And in terms of it and sort of expressions of your identity, we are multiple identities. And I really, really, I'm so pleased to see that happen in queer cinema in both of your films. It's a lovely, lovely, refreshing thing to see. For sure.
And I think too that it kind of does in both of them as well, is it's like, it's not about that. You know, the films are not centric around that part of it. And I wish there were movies like this that existed for me in my teen years, because I would have seen it without judgment, without explanation. I'm like, oh, there we are. I can see myself, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that I mean, we can't say that enough. Like how we, yeah, it's not because there's a few LGBT people on Netflix that we've covered the gamut of what we can do, the stories that we have to tell, and there's so many ways of being and exploring identity, and also changing throughout time. It's another thing that isn't really explored very much. So thank you for contributing to this big narrative that we need to keep moving. We need to keep moving it, and you've both like created works that really make a difference and show more ways of being, and also bring, as we've been saying, I'm not going to repeat it, like really interesting perspectives and ways of telling these stories that are original, and thank you for making those. And any last words, Kelly or Marion, that you would like to chat with each other about?
Yeah, I wanted to know what you thought happened after the film finished. Do you have an idea if your characters, if Lane comes back? Like, yeah.
Good question.
That's for you to decide.
She comes back.
There you have it. It's up to the audience, the intelligent audience.
Big romantic you.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I will say I've had a few young people be like, why can't they be together? We're tired of, you know, we want to see, you know, love stories where the gays can actually be happy in the end. And I'm like, yeah, I hear that.
No, because Lane had to go for her own individualism. It was taking back her power.
Yeah. I mean, in this case, definitely it had to happen, but I understand the desire to see some kind of, but I mean, for me also, you know, like this, I really try to, part of all of this is getting away from this idea of a happy ending, and like ending with marriage or ending with two people like confessing their love to each other or whatever, because that is such a monogamous arc. You know, when the two people end up together, like that's it, that's how they end up. And how sad and depressing that is, that there's no sense of like what comes after. you know, the confession of love or the decision to be together, and that's actually where the story begins, if you ask me. Yeah.
Life is messy, for God's sake, you know.
But that's interesting. Did I hear you correctly? You said young people ask you that?
Or just young people wanted to see, we're craving a love story where it would end happily.
But that's super interesting because historically, I can understand how a certain, I guess, like segment of the population might want those, because forever and ever and ever there were no good and happy endings for gay people at all, ever. But in the past X amount of years, let's say 10, for example, we are all about the happy ending. And what I like about your films is like life is more complex than a happy ending, and I like that. And it's not a negative ending. Nobody, you know, it's a moving on, and you know what you said, going to explore yourself. Like there's a lot more room in filmmaking for sort of the individual process of moving forward as a person with an identity that does not fit the social norms. Is not whether that, and I use queer because to me it involves all of these identities. So it's interesting that you would hear that, because that's all we have is happy endings.
Right. Because it depends what you're watching, right?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
And the lens you're watching from. Because I saw it as a happy ending because Birdie got her sense of, you know, sense of self back with her music and her relationship to her voice. And Fred got, you know, his wife back in a sense. You know, her spark was in their lives again. And Lane, she's gonna be fine. Like she's I think she's gonna show up again one day. But I, you know, my issue is I look at things from like individual soul happiness. So that's how I'll just you know. So it's if someone's a romantic, sure, they're gonna see it as, you know.
That is interesting though. Yeah.
I could just talk for hours.
I know.
you get a last. Well, a last. I keep saying last, but I don't want to exhaust you. We've been chatting for a bit, but it is a lovely Sunday afternoon. If you want to have more thoughts or questions, please go ahead. But we could also make sure that you guys, you folks, make another film soonish. I know it doesn't take 2 minutes to make a film. Soonish, and we'll do this. We could do this live in Montreal.
Yeah, I would love to know, Marion, what else you're working on, if you can say.
Yeah, I'm really cultivating right now, just kind of breathing, and
that's excellent. That's an excellent word.
Yeah, seeing, you know, there's lots of things. This room is full of whiteboards and Post-it notes, but you know, nothing. Connections are being made, but slowly, and it's still working on the release too. So almost there.
We're the same day, November 23rd.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Right?
Wow.
Yeah. Look at that.
I know.
It's a good day.
I think so.
Yeah.
Well, I'll definitely share it and tell people about it. I've already been telling people about it. So I'm excited for it to like go out, and I'm excited for people here to see the movie. And
yeah.
Well, what about you? What are you working on, Kelly?
Yeah.
Same thing, a couple different things. I can have ADD with my writing. It's wherever I'm curious about. Again, it's like I have to be like something emotionally invested. So this, you know, I have another bisexual story. I'm having trouble with the ending, but I've written for the most part of it because there's still stuff to explore there for me personally. And then just there's a biopic. Do you guys know who Edith Ide is? Her pen name was Lisa Ben. She wrote the first magazine for lesbians in 1947 in Los Angeles. You know her?
Yeah.
Vice versa. So I've been working on a biopic about her over the last.
Right. That's interesting.
If you read about her, you will fall in love with her. She was very socially awkward and didn't know how to make friends. And she was this beautiful writer. And she was like, well, I guess if I write this magazine, it will give me something to talk about.
Right.
It's the most pure. It's like such an accidental activist, pure, you know, creativity and love. Yeah. So that's where my heart is right now.
Nice.
That's a good place
I look forward to that. Nice.
Yeah, that's going to be I mean, more expensive than this last one, but that's the one I'll like die on. What's the term when you die on the hill for something? Like, what's that term? The hill. Is this the hill you want to die on? Yes, I will die on.
You want to die? I think I don't know that. That's
dying on the Edithide Hill.
Okay. Metaphor. I think I'm gonna have to start using it.
Yeah. The hill you want to die on, like, you know, dishes. You don't die on the hill for a dishes fight.
Right.
Okay. I like it. I love it. I think that's the perfect way to end this. I think we all need to find the hill upon which we want to die.
Yes.
Yeah.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
Well, we really look forward. Thank you so much for making those films, and thank you for spending some time with us this afternoon to talk about your work. You're both great. It was nice to hear more, and I really look forward to what's coming next. And yeah, next time we do this in a cafe in Montreal, okay?
Amazing.
Yes.
That sounds great.
Here for that. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed today.
Thank you.
Merci.
Merci, bye.